Marcus stopped mid-stride on the narrow trail, his hand rising instinctively to halt the group behind him. Sarah nearly collided with his backpack, her hiking boots skidding on loose pine needles. Behind her, Dev and Amanda froze, their conversations dying in their throats. "You hear that?" Marcus whispered. "I don't hear anything," Sarah replied, adjusting her pack straps. "Exactly." The Appalachian forest had thrummed with life all afternoon. Birdsong weaving through the canopy, insects buzzing in lazy patterns, the distant chatter of a creek. Now, as the sun began its descent toward the ridgeline, everything had stopped. Even the wind had died, leaving the October air thick and still. Then the trees moved. Not swayed. Moved. The massive oaks and towering pines surrounding their campsite bent inward simultaneously, their trunks flexing like ribs expanding with breath. The motion was synchronized, deliberate, almost gentle. Leaves rustled in perfect unison despite the complete absence of wind. "What the hell?" Dev's voice cracked slightly. The ground beneath their feet rose, a barely perceptible swell that lifted them inches before settling again. Sarah stumbled, grabbing Marcus's arm. The forest floor undulated like a chest drawing air, soil and roots shifting in a rhythm that felt impossibly organic. "Earthquake," Amanda suggested weakly, though they all knew earthquakes didn't move like this. Marcus pulled out his GPS unit, watching the coordinates flicker and stabilize. "We're still on the trail. About 2 miles from the parking area." He tried to keep his voice steady, authoritative. He'd led dozens of these trips. There was always an explanation. The breathing continued, in, out, a patient rhythm that seemed to come from the forest itself. The trees exhaled together, trunks straightening before drawing inward again. Each cycle lasted roughly 15 seconds. "We should set up camp," Marcus decided, forcing confidence into his words. "There's still an hour of daylight. We'll radio the ranger station, let them know we're experiencing unusual seismic activity." But when he pulled out the radio, he found only static. His phone showed no signal, which wasn't surprising this deep in the wilderness. What was surprising was how quickly the light was fading. The sun hadn't reached the horizon yet, but shadows were already pooling between the trees, thick and dark as oil. As they hurriedly pitched their tents in the clearing, none of them noticed the trail marker they'd passed 30 minutes earlier, the one indicating they were on the Blackwood Trail. The same marker now stood in the opposite direction, exactly where they'd just come from. Sarah woke to wrongness. The sensation crawled under her skin before conscious thought formed. Something fundamental had shifted in the night. She lay rigid in her sleeping bag, listening to the tent fabric ripple with that impossible breathing. And out, and out. The rhythm had continued through the darkness, a lullaby from something vast and patient. Gray dawn light filtered through the tent's mesh window. She checked her watch, 6:47 a.m. They'd planned to break camp at 7 and hike out before the autumn heat set in. "Marcus," she called softly. His tent was pitched 10 feet away. "You awake?" No response. Sarah unzipped her tent and stepped into a forest that wasn't the one she'd fallen asleep in. The clearing was the same size, their tents in the same positions. But the trees had changed. Where massive oaks had stood sentinel the night before, white birches now clustered like pale fingers reaching upward. The creek they'd camped beside, the one whose burbling had masked the forest's breathing until she'd finally drifted off, was gone entirely. In its place stood a dense wall of mountain laurel that looked decades old, its twisted branches creating an impenetrable barrier. "Guys." Her voice pitched higher than she intended. "Marcus, Dev, Amanda." They emerged from their tents with the sluggish movements of people who'd barely slept, their faces reflecting the same creeping dread that gnawed at Sarah's composure. "The trail," Dev said flatly, pointing. The Blackwood Trail, clearly marked and well-maintained when they'd made camp, had vanished. Where the packed earth path should have been, virgin forest stretched unbroken. No gap in the trees, no cleared ground, nothing but undergrowth that looked untouched for generations. Marcus pulled out his GPS, his hands trembling slightly. "This doesn't make sense. We're in the same coordinates, same elevation. But the topography." He turned the device as if a different angle might correct what it showed. "According to this, there's never been a trail here." Amanda walked the perimeter of their camp, her footsteps careful, methodical. She was the quiet one, a botanist who joined them to study fall foliage patterns. Now she crouched beside something that made her go very still. "Marcus, you need to see this." They gathered around her. Half buried in the leaf litter was a weathered sign, its metal surface corroded by years of exposure. The words were barely legible. "Danger, area closed." Multiple hikers missing October 2019. Do not enter Blackwood region. Appalachian Trail Authority. Below it, in fresher marker, someone had scrawled, "The forest is alive. It took them. We'll take you too." That's impossible, Marcus breathed. It's October 2022. We were just. The forest exhaled around them, a long, satisfied breath that bent every tree in unison. They ran. Logic abandoned them as primal fear took over. Dev crashed through the laurel thicket first, branches tearing at his face and jacket. Sarah followed, her pack forgotten at the campsite. Amanda and Marcus brought up the rear, Marcus still clutching his useless GPS like a talisman. But the forest was patient. After 15 minutes of desperate flight, they burst into a clearing and stopped, panting, disoriented. Sarah's stomach dropped. 4 tents stood arranged in a familiar pattern. A backpack, her backpack, leaned against a tree where she'd left it. They'd circled back to their camp. "No," Dev whispered. "No, we ran straight. We didn't turn around." Marcus spun in a slow circle, trying to find their exit point in the trees. The laurel thicket stood in a different direction now, where the birches had been. The birches were gone entirely, replaced by massive hemlocks that hadn't been there before. "It's moving us," Amanda said quietly. She'd knelt beside the campfire ring, cold stones they'd carefully arranged last night. Except the stones were covered in moss now, weathered by what looked like years of exposure. "The forest is rearranging itself around us, moving us like pieces on a board." "That's insane," Dev snapped. "Forests don't just. Look at your hands." They all did. Dev's fingernails were longer than they'd been that morning, a week's growth compressed into hours. Sarah noticed her hair felt heavier, hanging past her shoulders when she'd had it cut short 3 days before their trip. Marcus's beard, cleanly shaved yesterday, now shadowed his jaw. Time was wrong here. Not just the forest. Time itself was breathing, expanding and contracting like lungs, pulling them forward in irregular jumps. Amanda moved to her tent and retrieved a small notebook, flipping through pages with increasing urgency. "I've been documenting the breathing pattern. The intervals are getting longer. Started at 15 seconds per cycle. Now they're 30 seconds. It's like it's slowing down. Getting ready to." She didn't finish. The forest inhaled. This time the breath was enormous. Trees bent at impossible angles, their trunks nearly horizontal as they curved inward toward the campsite. The ground rose in a great swell, lifting them 10 feet in the air. The sky visible through the canopy darkened from morning gray to twilight purple. When the exhalation came, it brought sound, a voice, if something that vast and patient could be called a voice. It spoke through rustling leaves and creaking wood, through the whisper of disturbed soil and the groan of stressed roots. The words formed not in their ears but directly in their minds. "You are remembered. You are kept. You are part of us now." Sarah saw them then, shadows between the trees moving with the breathing rhythm. Human shapes, or what had once been human. They swayed with the forest, their movements synchronized with every branch and leaf. Some wore remnants of hiking clothes from decades past. Others were nearly absorbed, their forms more tree than flesh, bark growing over skin, roots extending from feet buried in the eternal soil. One shadow moved closer, and Sarah recognized the ranger uniform, though it hung in tatters. The face was gone, replaced by a smooth expanse of pale fungus, but the name tag was still legible: Warden. "The others who went missing," Marcus said hoarsely. "They're still here. They're still." The forest breathed out again, and their campsite aged another year in seconds. Amanda's notebook held the answer, though understanding came too late. As the forest's breathing slowed to a deep, meditative rhythm, 45 seconds per cycle now, she flipped back through pages that shouldn't exist. She'd only brought a new notebook, but hundreds of pages filled it now, months or years of observations compressed into impossible time. Her handwriting evolved across the entries, growing more frantic, then resigned, then eerily calm. "I figured it out," she said, her voice distant. She was reading her own words from an entry dated 2 years in the future. "The forest isn't alive. We are. Or we were." Dev laughed, the sound cracking into something like a sob. "That doesn't make any sense. The breathing pattern, I mapped it against human respiratory rates. But it's not one person. It's hundreds of people breathing together, synchronized. Everyone who's ever gotten lost here. They become part of it. Their breath becomes its breath." She looked up from the notebook, her eyes bright with tears or madness. "We're not trapped in the forest. We're being digested by it. Absorbed." Sarah felt it then, the pull. Her feet had been in the same spot for too long. She tried to lift her boot and felt resistance like standing in wet concrete. Looking down, she saw thin rootlets emerging from the soil, wrapping around her hiking boots, probing for flesh beneath the leather. Marcus was frantically working his radio, cycling through every frequency. There has to be someone. There has to be. The radio crackled. A voice emerged from the static, distant and distorted. Rescue team en route to Blackwood region. 4 hikers reported missing October 18, 2022. Search party established at. That's today, Sarah breathed. October 18th is today. We just got here yesterday. No, Amanda said softly, still reading her impossible notebook. We got here 3 years ago. We've been here for 3 years. We just keep experiencing the same days over and over while the forest slowly. She gestured at the shadows swaying between the trees, at Ranger Warden watching with his fungal face. We're in a time loop, but our bodies are still aging. Still changing. Eventually we'll synchronize completely. We'll stop being separate people and just become part of the breathing. Dev had gone quiet. He'd stopped fighting the roots around his feet and stood swaying slightly, his movements beginning to match the forest's rhythm. And out. And out. No, Marcus said firmly. No, I don't accept this. There's always a way out. Always. He pulled out his pocket knife and began sawing at the rootlets, but for every one he cut, 3 more emerged. Sarah found herself swaying too, her breath synchronizing with the forest despite her resistance. It wasn't entirely unpleasant. The panic was fading, replaced by a strange peace. What was so wrong about becoming part of something larger, something patient and eternal? She shook her head, trying to clear it. Amanda, your notebook. Does it say how to break the cycle? Amanda flipped through pages, through entries that tracked years of observations, experiments, desperate attempts to escape. Her future self had tried everything. The last entry, dated 5 years ahead, was a single sentence in handwriting that had almost stopped being human. Stop fighting. The forest only keeps what struggles. Let go and you might slip through. That's it. Marcus's voice rose. Let go? What does that even mean? But Sarah understood. She could feel it in the way the roots gripped tighter when she pulled, loosened when she relaxed. The forest was like a predator, it held on to what tried to flee. It fed on struggle, on the desperate human need to survive. We have to stop breathing, she said. Stop matching its rhythm. Hold our breath when it inhales. Exhale when it holds. Break the synchronization. That's insane, Dev muttered, but his words were slurred. His eyes had glazed over. The forest took a deep breath and Sarah did the opposite. She exhaled completely, emptying her lungs. Marcus understood immediately and did the same. Amanda hesitated, then joined them. For a moment, nothing happened. The roots continued their slow work. The shadows swayed closer. Then Sarah felt it, a slip, a discontinuity. The world flickered like a bad television signal. The trees in front of her were suddenly different trees. The tent behind her was both there and not there, existing in multiple states simultaneously. Again, she gasped. On the next breath, the forest exhaled. They inhaled sharply. The world stuttered. Marcus grabbed their hands, forming a chain. Together. We do this together. The forest breathed in. They breathed out. The synchronization broke. Time lurched sickeningly. The forest roared, or they imagined it roared, as the pattern disrupted. The shadows shrieked silently, their forms flickering between human and tree, trapped in permanent transformation because they'd never broken the rhythm. Reality folded. Sarah saw it all at once. Every iteration of their loop, every day repeated, stretching backward for 3 years. She saw herself setting up this same camp hundreds of times, saw her future self becoming one of the swaying shadows, saw the moment she would have stopped being herself entirely. Then the world snapped back into focus. They stood on the Blackwood Trail, whole and unchanged. The sun was setting, the same sunset they'd watched 3 years and 1 day ago. Marcus's GPS showed 6:47 p.m., October 17, 2022. They'd lost exactly 1 hour. Behind them, barely visible in the gathering darkness, 4 tents stood in a familiar clearing. A weathered sign lay half buried in the leaves. And between the trees, shadows swayed in rhythm, patient as the forest, breathing in unison, waiting for the next hikers who would fail to break the pattern. Marcus was already running down the trail toward the parking area. Dev and Amanda followed, their footsteps pounding the packed earth. Sarah lingered for just a moment, looking back at the clearing they'd nearly joined. She could still feel it, the pull, the rhythm, the seductive peace of letting go. Then she turned and ran, her own breath deliberately chaotic, refusing to fall into any pattern at all, until the parking lot appeared through the trees and they stumbled into the harsh yellow glow of the security lights. The forest exhaled behind them, patient as ever. It would wait. It always did. The Blackwood region of the Appalachian Trail remains closed. Rangers report unusual seismic activity in the area. 4 hikers, Marcus Chin, Sarah Patel, Dev Williams and Amanda Foster, filed reports describing temporal distortions and hallucinations, attributed to carbon monoxide exposure from a faulty camping stove. The reports have been sealed. The breathing continues.